What's up, everyone? Thomas here with For Real, and I am literally just logging in to this conversation right after watching the 95th Oscar Awards ceremony. And there's lots of thoughts that I have about it. But the best part about this is that I have some friends to talk with it about. So, joining me here this evening, we have Derek on the line, the writer and journalist over at nerdbot.com. Derek, you want to say hey real quick?
Hey guys, how are you?
And also joining us is Nick, the host of Nick Flicks podcast, which I will actually be featured on here in a couple of weeks. So, hey, Nick, say hi.
Hello, everyone. How are you guys doing?
Guys, there's so much to talk about with the Oscars.
I know.
But unlike last year's Oscars, I was pretty good disgruntled about last year's Oscars, and obviously shenanigans happened last year, and there's a whole conversation to have about that. But this year, I feel like a lot of things went right. Nick, let's start with you. Do you have that same sense of like this was a good year for the Oscars?
Yes, I think I mean my favorite movie last year was Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Mm-hmm.
So to see it basically clean sweep, I know like it won seven, which is not like an all-time. It sure as hell felt like it though through the broadcast where it was like, man, it is winning everything it's nominated for. And it got snubbed on some categories where I thought for sure could have been nominated, but it's great when like a movie that I know nothing about going into, you see it at a time where I never thought this had a chance because it came out in March. And
Mm-hmm.
like the Oscars forget about great movies that come out before October. And the fact that it is a box office success where it made over 100 million over like a long period of just word of mouth, and like every week it was like 6 million, 7 million. And it's great when a movie like that. And so when people complain that there's no original movies, but then they don't want to see this movie because they're like, well, I don't know if it's for, I'm like, give it a chance. It is so damn good and it's really funny. So at any
Mm-hmm.
like worst case scenario, you will laugh at a lot of the stuff in this movie. But yeah, I thought the show flowed as best as you could make an Academy Award show flow. I thought it flowed pretty well overall. A few little
Yeah.
nitpicks like I DM'd you about where I'm like
Oh, yeah.
maybe cut a few things, but overall I thought they kept the bits down and it was like okay, just go, just go, just go.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's true, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But you make a very valid point about people wanting more original films, and then getting this, and then there's hesitation about whether it's a film for them. I'm really hoping that Everything Everywhere's performance at the Oscars tonight gets people back into the theaters. I hope they re-release it, and I really hope that people do give this movie a chance because it is so good. Anyway, Derek, what was your feelings about the Oscars overall tonight?
Yeah, I'm actually going to largely agree with Nick. I was as I was tweeting, kind of live tweeting it and talking about it, the stark difference from the pandering feeling that last year felt like, where they were just trying to desperately capture an audience that just doesn't care. Like, I don't care how much you want to try to do your little fan favorite or take out some of the awards and just try to make this weird jolted, like everything felt totally imbalanced last year. And I'm not even talking about the slap that we can't get over. Like just in general, the whole evening last year just felt off. Like everything felt like it was for people that don't care about it, and they just completely disregarded us who are here, who are going to spend 3.5 hours watching the show and then can't wait to talk about it afterwards. I didn't have that feeling at all last year. And this year I was like, man, even with just the little missteps around there, this was a no frills, all business. Like, let's get to the awards, let's get to the speeches, let's highlight the films. This is why we are here. And that was just, I really had a great time. Everything felt really safe, but I feel like that was probably the right move. And I really, really enjoyed it actually. And then, yeah, with Everything Everywhere All at Once, I remember when I saw it, I, I was just floored. I was absolutely dumbfounded. I hadn't had a movie that had made me cry for that long, like just nonstop. Like that third act started, and I don't think I had any tears left. Like I just cried like the whole last half hour of that movie. And I just remember leaving the theater and being like, there is nothing that's going to top this. And there were some strong contenders as we got towards the later end of the year. But like Nick said, the strength of Everything Everywhere at Once just slowly garnering that train and just gathering 5 here, gathering 6 there, gathering 7 there, just that word of mouth just kind of tumbling down. I think it really gives validity to what we really want in movies. We want movies to be original. We want the risk, and the Academy rewarding that risk is I'm so excited for what's to come, not necessarily in 2023, but the risks that we're going to get in 2024 because of how far everything everywhere all at once is gone. I'm ready, man. I'm so excited.
Yeah, certainly something to be super excited about. I mean, it's really cool that we have that excitement watching this show. It was just so elating to, be hanging on the words when they say, and the Oscar goes to, and you just are like ready for them to say whatever is related to everything everywhere.
Yeah, well, DeBose kind of gave it away when she started choking up, and that's where I was like, I started tearing up. Where I'm like, oh, it's going to Key. I'm like, yes, because you never know. As much as I felt like he should win and was basically winning everything, you just never know, because you're like, there's like, look, Jamie Lee Curtis, no one would have picked her to win like a month ago until she won. I forget what award it was a couple days ago, but it was like, oh, I wasn't considering her like an actual contender. And I'm like, so like for Key to be kind of the favorite through the whole thing, I was like, sometimes when you think it's the slam dunk favorite, they throw a curve and someone else wins, and you're like, oh, wow. Think of like the year everyone thought Stallone was going to win in Creed. And then like it went to Mark Rylance, and everyone's like, oh my God, that was a total shocker, because everyone thought it'd go to Stallone. So yeah, that moment when she started crying, you just tell everyone there wanted him to win. I think even the nominees were like, if he wins, I'm not going to get upset. Like, come on, it's such a good story.
What's interesting is like how the momentum going through. It's the I think it was the SAG Awards that you're referring to, Nick, where Jamie Lee won the Best Supporting Actress at the SAG Awards, and that was also when I was thinking, oh, I guess someone from Everything Everywhere is going to win Best Supporting Actress, because I think you had a very good point there. One thing that I was thinking about throughout this show is my experience with the show last year, where I remember having a favorite for Best Picture, but then seeing the momentum of Coda going through the program, and then like mid-show, like changing my prediction because of what you're talking about, Nick, that like surprise, either upset or out of nowhere kind of win that could happen. But Derek, talk to me a little bit about your mentality going through the show. Like what kind of roller coaster were you on mentally as you were watching it?
I was really pulling for everything. I really, really wanted to be a part of that train. And I was very glad that they started relatively early and they gave us some of those big features, and they gave us supporting actor, like, I don't know, within the first 45 minutes. Because there was definitely a part of me, like, especially with the BAFTAs, and I know BAFTAs don't always tell us what's going to happen, but it's that lone precursor where it's Kwan all the way through, and then the BAFTA is like, no, it's Barry. That's who it's supposed to be. And that made me go, oh my God, maybe it's not a lock. Like maybe there's a part of that Academy that's like, no, we're gonna go off on our own little thing. So there was definitely some tension there. I had a lot of overlapping like should and hopefuls. Like I was trying to use logic and heart and try to put them together. And shockingly, Jamie Lee Curtis didn't surprise me. I think I felt like she campaigned really hard for this. And while I personally think that it probably should have gone to Stephanie Sue, I think that she's probably the true linchpin of what makes that movie work. If anybody was going to beat her, I kind of wanted it to be Jamie Lee Curtis so that Everything Everywhere All at Once could get it. But I mean, as far as a roller coaster, this was, as sure as I was about a lot of things, there were a lot of times where I was just like, they cracked open that envelope and I was like, oh my God, here it comes. What's it going to be? And there were some shockers there, honestly. There were some where logic just beat out and I was like, yep, I knew it. And then there were others where my heart was singing bigger than my logic. And I was like, yes, this is everything I've ever wanted. Let's go. So yeah, it was a pretty emotional ride this year for sure.
And
Yeah.
Derek, though, you hit something on the head earlier.
Mhm.
Sorry, but
No, go ahead,
you
Nick, for
said
sure.
about the Oscars pandering to a crowd that doesn't care about it, and like, look, the Oscars. I mean, the highest like viewed cable things are sports generally, because of how streaming's taken over. But the Oscars, it was like last year was like top 100, but it was in the bottom half. But it's
Mhm.
like, look, it's such a niche thing. Why try to pander? Like, just pander to movie fans because that's all
Yeah,
who's really going to stick through it. And most people who are not movie fans will be like, "Oh, I've never heard of half of these movies," which is fine because that's not your audience. And if
right.
they see it wins an Oscar, maybe they'll check it out. But it's also like you don't have to pander to that. Just make your award show your award show. Don't worry about trying to check off every box of like, okay, well, we got to get this demographic, this demographic. It's like, no, this is not a presidential debate or the Super Bowl where people will find something that it's like, no, this is the Oscars
Yeah.
for movie lovers. That's the whole point.
Yeah,
So
the the very limited amount of people in the world that have actually seen all of the best documentary features and all of the international features, like that is a small window of people. So why are you
Mhm.
trying to pander to people that like, yeah, they didn't go to Sundance, they didn't go to South by Southwest, like even people in press that usually get even Academy voters probably didn't see House Made of Splinters until like January 31st. Like it just that movie, the only reason I was even able to see that movie is because I saw it at Sundance. That's like the only so like just I'm the person that's rooting for those types of things. Like don't pander for the guys on TikTok. They don't know what that movie is. They've never heard of it. The international features, like only one of them was on Netflix. The rest of them uh, I had to hunt down. Like I
Mhm.
had to hunt down those movies, and I spend my whole, outside of my day job career trying to hunt down those movies. So yeah, you're absolutely right, dude.
Ugh.
Make the show for us because we're the ones that are going to come back year after year. We're the ones that are going to keep you afloat when things go south and when
Mm.
the viewership is dropped. We're all still going to be doing this. The fleeting
Great.
TikTok. We're going to use the flash as the moment of
Oh
choice.
god,
Like
yeah. Oh
they're not
god.
here. They're not here this year.
Which still baffles my mind
Oh
that
my god.
when they're
I
like
was
the
more
biggest
mad about that than I was the slap,
the best
honestly. Like
the best thing too was they're like the moment that made the crowd go, oh, I'm like, for a movie that wasn't in theaters because it was the Snyder cut. So I go, well, you can't, by definition, you can't make a crowd cheer if it's not played in front of a crowd. And I go, there is no way that moment was. So I almost was like, that was the Oscars. Like, we need to steal some buzz, and like I'm like, no one would have picked that moment. But yeah, no, you're right. I mean, Thomas, I don't mean to keep cutting,
No,
but
you're
that was just a
good. No,
great point. It
absolutely. I'm
was a
just
great
listening.
point, though,
I
'cause
love
I've
this.
heard multiple people say like award shows don't need to pander to people who don't give a crap about them. It's like
right.
when, look, I'm a big football fan, but it's like I don't care to watch the NFL award shows, and you know what?
Yeah.
There's nothing you could do to make me care about it. So don't. Just do your thing, and whoever wants to watch it will watch it because there's nothing else to watch that particular day. But I think for the Oscars, it's like, look, people forget that every single year there is a handful of films no one's heard of. Like when people go, "Oh, well, the Oscars weren't always like this." Yeah, they were. Look back at every year, there's always a handful of Best Picture noms that no one's heard of or no one watched, or people would have been shocked that was like a film that like a movie like Shakespeare in Love. I could tell you most people in my family don't even know that's a movie,
Yeah.
and yet it's an Oscar winner. And it's like, look, and that was in the 90s when there was a ton of huge, big time, Oscar winning films. And it's like, that's just what the Oscars are, man. So don't worry about if this year isn't a year where you're like, oh man, blockbuster wise, none of these movies made money. Who cares? Again, the people who are going to watch it are going to watch it every single year. I'm not going to not watch the Oscars any given year because I'm like, well, I didn't see most of those movies because I want to watch it to see who wins.
Yeah.
It's fun for me, and
Yeah.
with two little kids, we did have to fast forward through some stuff today because I'm like, I gotta get caught up. I don't want anything
Mhm.
spoiled. But I was like, no, I mean, to me, this year was just a good example of, I think, getting back to normal. And I think you had enough a variety of movies too, where maybe a casual fan might watch because of Top Gun or
Mhm.
Avatar, where you're like, okay, I know those movies. For me, like a sentimental thing was I love the Fablemans because I'm such a big Spielberg guy and I love his story. And I did like the movie, but I was like, I think a guy like him was glad to see a movie like Everything Everywhere All at Once because he's a film fan and
Yeah.
he doesn't need an Oscar. So for him, he's probably like, this is great because I want to see something like that.
Yeah.
And it's great to see people championing that movie, even people who were nominated as well. So, no, I just think it's a great story. And, Kwan's story is amazing of like 30 years of not being in a movie. And like,
Yeah.
I mean, and then Brandon Fraser's comeback too. So like, it was a great year. Michelle Yeoh not
Yeah.
winning, like it was just a great year of these great stories that I hope at least give people the want to go check these out.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
and I
thanks.
think
Thanks.
there's so many great underdog stories here in this evening. Like so many people are first time winners and underdog winners, and I think in general, like yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Most of the nominees were probably pretty excited about a lot of the winners tonight, and I feel like those are the stories that will gain new fans. Like Kwan's whole story is enough to make somebody tune in next year to be like, oh, I wonder if there's going to be another one like this, or Brendan Fraser having this wonderful renaissance and his whole story coming out and all the things that have happened to him, and regardless of how you feel about the whale, him winning is a way to get more people to watch because they'll tune in next year if you keep highlighting these types of movies. So yeah.
It's so interesting because you guys are talking about a very fascinating subject. I agree entirely with you guys. Tailor this to the people who are paying attention to it, right? Don't try to earn new audiences. You tried that, it didn't work. And I know that there is still kind of like this call to have blockbusters. I don't know why Avatar is necessarily getting now. I mean,
Yeah, no,
it
I'm
won
with
best
you on that,
visuals,
but
right?
that's
Like, okay,
fine.
cool.
Yeah.
Give Avatar best visuals. That was 13 years in the making, I guess.
Right.
But like, this obligatory need to put blockbusters in. That's not the audience that's having these conversations or that's engaging with the Oscars. The way that we are. I mean, Derek, you're mentioning. I mean, I went to Sundance to watch or at least last year covered Sundance to watch the documentaries. I went to TIFF to go to the world premiere of The Fablemans, which thanks Nick for reminding me that was another movie that was shut out.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, I mean, from everything, I was like, but
Yeah.
I think that's one where, again, for like Spielberg, he's like, hey, I got to make my movie
He
about
did.
my life. So
Yeah.
like, if I win, great. But I think he's at the point in his career, and that's what I like about what Spielberg's been doing the last few years, is he's like, I'm just gonna do what I want now. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to be a big blockbuster movie, and I will do passion projects because I'm 76 years old and I don't. I mean, you want to talk about a guy who has nothing left to prove to anyone, and it's like that's good because and when you're talking about blockbusters, I think it's important too that like if it's one of the best movies of the year, then nominate it. That's totally
Right.
fine. But
Yeah.
don't think you have to just to gain viewers.
Mhm.
Otherwise, you would have done The Dark Knight, which is why there's 10 movies anyway, or
Right.
more because people are like, how is that not? You really didn't want to nominate that, and it's funny when they mentioned during directing, I had mentioned it to my wife for the Best Director award when they mentioned how it used to be one for comedy and one for drama, and then they combined them. And I go, yeah, but the funny thing is, you never see comedies, even great comedies, where you go, oh my God, that's one of the best movies of the year. They'll never get a Best Director nomination. So I
Banshees
go,
is as close as they get, and that's as
Yes.
dark as it can go.
Exactly. It's like it has to be a super ass dark comedy or like Everything Everywhere All at Once. You could it's such a hodgepodge of what you could classify it as
Yeah.
that yes, there's a lot of comedy in it, but it's also very dramatic. It's like science fiction, so it's almost not fair to use that one. But like you'll never see like a well reviewed by fans and critics like comedy where like the director will get Best Director. It'll
Yeah.
always go to more serious movies, or like you said, Banshees of Inisherin, where it's like dark as shit, where you're just
Yeah.
like, okay, that's a comedy, but that is like you really got to be in the right mood or
Yeah.
be like it is not made for everyone,
No.
which is okay.
Yeah.
And like
Yeah.
I like that movie a lot, but I also would be like, I'm not going to recommend it to people who I know would not like it because it is
Yeah.
dark and you have to be, and it's like watching a play, you know, like that type of movie is a lot of dialogue. Like we just watched Tar, which, well, I watched half of it. I have two little kids, so like trying to sit through like a 2.5 hour movie, that's, you know, it gets
Mhm.
tough. So my wife finished and she goes, "Oh my God," she's like, "Kate Blanchett, I hated her in that movie, but not in a bad way. Like I hated the person so much because she's
Yeah.
so good." But she goes, "That movie I would not recommend to like our friends because it is like a very dialogue heavy."
Yep.
Y'all, I could
And
have
I
a whole podcast just
yeah.
on Tar.
Oh
'Cause
yeah.
Tar,
No,
because Tar
and-
was one. Tar was one. I saw a press screening for Tar, and it was one that I left the screening thinking I didn't like that movie. I really didn't, and I
and
had
I
to.
wouldn't blame you.
Right, and I
Because
had
I
to
don't
call
know
him.
how I feel about
I know,
it.
right?
Like,
I had to call it. I sat in it for 24 hours, and then the next day I called a friend of mine who loved it, and I'm like, "Bro, changed my mind." And then he said some things, and I was like, "Ah, all right, yeah, maybe Kate Blanchett should get that Oscar."
You know, it's one where I'm not gonna lie. I was angry that that movie started its first 4.5 minutes with the
with that whole
credits.
oh, the
That
Yeah,
credits.
and
That's
I'm like,
right. Yep,
yeah, it starts with the credits where I'm like, wait a
And
minute.
backwards, by the way.
Yeah, and
backwards. Yeah,
backward, and I'm
I was
like,
very
drawing
weird.
the projector when I saw it. I was like, who's messing with this movie right now? What is happening?
Font so goddamn small that on a 65-inch TV, I'm like, I can't even
Right.
tell what the hell is on there. And then I did like actually how the movie starts with her interview, because that
Yeah.
felt like a real
That's
interview. And I'm
great.
like, damn, I'm like, Kate Blanchett, this feels like a real person. But
Mhm.
you know, again though, it's like that's part of the Oscars. You're gonna get movies like that where you're like,
Yeah.
look, that movie's so heavily driven on her back of like, you have if she's not great in that movie, then it's probably not nominated. Like that's part of
Yeah.
that type of movie. But again, I think this year did have a lot sprinkled in where you had like, you know, Top Gun Maverick, Avatar, the more well knowns. And like I said, I mean, For Everything Everywhere All at Once, it was a box office hit. It just was a small time movie that you don't see that a lot. It's actually, this is a fascinating year because that and Top Gun were two movies that, while way different in budget and marketing, the word of mouth on both of those movies made bank for so goddamn long. It's
Yeah.
crazy. Like, I mean, Top Gun was like #1 in like early September, where you're like, that movie's been out since May and it was still like raking in huge bucks at the box. It's just crazy. And you know, it was, but this was just a good Oscar kind of reminder of like, look, for people who don't give a shit about the Oscars,
Mhm.
these stories are so cool though. It is
Yeah.
so cool
You
to
know,
see
that's-
some of the stuff that happened. And
That's
Yeah.
a good point that I want to make here, is that there was a lot of tonight that circled around good stories. Obviously, Ke Huy
Yeah.
Quan, that's a fantastic story. Brendan Fraser, that's also a good story. Even Naatu, right? I was
My heart.
I went into this wanting that to win best song, because it was the only thing that was nominated, and honestly, RRR was done dirty not getting more.
I'm
I
shocked
blame
they didn't
India.
get
I blame
more.
the whole country. It's
The whole
their
country.
fault. It's their
But-
fault. They had it in their hands.
Right, but as I was watching through the show, and this is kind of what the emotional roller coaster thing is, that I watched the Naatu performance, which I love, and I'm going to get off of this and go watch that scene again, right? But then
So
I
good.
watched the Lady Gaga performance for "Hold My Hand," and I was like, "Oh, Lady Gaga's
Oh yeah,
of course
she's-
amazing."
Yeah.
And that was a great performance. And then Rihanna got up, and she's coming off of goodwill from the halftime show at the Super Bowl, and so I
Yeah.
started getting nervous. I was like, wait. Like, I love Naatu, but there is some star power behind at least two of these other songs that might come through. And so I think that there was a story that kind of held up Naatu with it being an Indian production,
Yeah.
and having this be its one chance at an Oscar. And then it winning that. I was very
it
happy about
honestly,
that.
it legitimately cracked me up when when Lady Gaga gets on there and she's over here giving like this impassionate speech about how much the song means to her, and I'm like, girl, this is from a movie about Navy pilots that don't actually exist. Like, what are you talking about right
Yeah,
now?
it was a song not matching the movie,
Not
and like
at all.
you know, look, I like Top Gun Maverick, but I'm like, I
Yeah.
wouldn't think of a song with that much passion would be
No.
the
And
like.
she,
it's-
and she
it's
like
like-
stripped it down. She took her
Oh,
gown
she
off.
did.
She was like, I'm going like, rehearsal studio style. Like
It was
this
fantastic.
this is all me. I loved it. It was a great performance, but I was like, girl, you got to pull that back just a little bit.
Right, a night of fashion and glamour, and she got down. I think it was just an all black kind of like t-shirt, and no makeup. I noticed that she took all of her makeup
she
off.
took it all off.
Yep.
I was like, what is happening?
I have a question for you guys. So with Brandon Fraser's performance specifically with the movie The Whale, I've seen some people complain that like they don't like that he's in a fat suit and they're like, why can't you give it to a heavier set actor? And here's my thing. I'm curious what you guys thinking. Now look, I think a movie like that is an extreme because he's supposed to be a 350-pound person. That's not like a healthy weight, clearly, because he's dying in the movie. Like, how many 350-pound actors are on the planet? It's not like it was a movie where like, oh, he's supposed to be 225 and like a druggie or whatever, or something where you're casting someone that doesn't, if he's supposed to be like a historic, Jewish guy and they make it a non-Jewish actor, or supposed to be black, they make him white, or vice versa, like whatever it is, where you're like, oh, why didn't you give it to someone who would actually fit that description? I feel like for that movie specific to get mad at the prosthetic part of it is it's like, well, but again, he's a guy who's like an unhealthy weight that you are not going to survive. There's just not going to be a talent pool of actors that big.
Yeah.
But also, if the director, like Darren Aronofsky, looks at Brandon Fraser and is like, you're my guy for my movie, how could you tell the director, don't cast that guy? If that's who you're like, that's the dude who has the heart to play this role. And again, it's not like it's something where, I mean, Brandon Fraser's a big dude, but it's like, look, well, you basically would have to have gained another 150 pounds, which would kill you. So
yeah, I never felt like it was going out of its way to belittle or kind of do anything of a disservice to someone that I never felt like they were mocking obesity in any way.
That's what I thought. Yeah,
if anything, they were actually doing it way more appropriately. And listen, you can say whatever you want about the movie as a whole, because I have a lot of misgivings about The Whale. Even though it worked for me, I completely understand people that absolutely despised it. It's stagey, it's overwritten, it's very Aronofsky, who can't escape his own weird, everything's an allegory, direction style, writing style, whatever. But I mean, I never felt offended by Brendan Fraser. Like, if anything, it felt really endearing and it felt really honest. So yeah, the backlash for that I felt was a little uncalled for.
And I think this kind of goes back to trying to appease the mainstream, because I think the people who have the most complaints about The Whale didn't watch it. A lot of people don't even recognize but seriously, a lot of people don't even
you're absolutely right.
That The Whale is not a title about his obesity.
Right.
Like, people don't recognize that. They see The Whale, they see someone who's overweight, and they say, oh, the title is a representation of the character. No, there's actually a very good reason that is called The Whale that has nothing to do with his obesity. And so I think that there's a large conversation you can have here about about representation, about who should play what parts. As far as I'm concerned right now, in this point in time, Brendan Fraser was the person to play that role. That award he won tonight and all the awards he's won for that role were not just handed to him. He earned that. And that's acting. As far as I'm concerned, right?
and that's the thing. Like, ultimately, you're still an actor. Like, it's okay to play a part that is not exactly. Now, again, it's a different story if, again, it's something historically, or you're just like, look, there's plenty of, like I said, if it's a role where you're like, hey, you got to be 250 pounds, and again, not Brandon Fraser. Let's just say you picked some really skinny guy because he's the hot name, and you're like, okay, we're just gonna put you in a fat suit. Well, you tell me you couldn't find a great actor who's 250 pounds. There's plenty of them. So, like, a friend of mine got all mad about that, and I'm like, it's not like a fat phobia. They're not fat shaming people with this role. Again, it's a character who's so big.
You make a valid point with the name brand thing, because I do think that there's a lot of times when movies will cast people for the name brand. Case in point, which has nothing to do with awards, but just a really quick deviation. When the movie Uncharted casted Tom Holland.
Oh yeah, I have, and I love
There's
that video game, but I'm like, man, that
that
movie's like it's the opposite of how good The Last of Us is. That like
uh
Uncharted's the opposite of what you do with a
Yeah.
video game adaptation, which
Yeah,
is
no,
just
yes.
absolutely. Absolutely.
And that is something that bothers me, right? Like
yeah.
when you get into casting for name brandness and not for talent or for appropriateness of the role, right? And I guess that maybe that's just where I am at this point in time, is like, was the actor right for the role?
Yeah.
Whether they personally represented that role or not, were they right for the role? And how it was executed. And unfortunately, we don't know that until after the movie happens.
Well, I think
right?
there's a pretty stark difference between the fat suit of Tom Hanks and Elvis and the fat suit and rendering of Brendan Fraser. Like they're both, you talk about somebody who's right for the role, and you can tell that Fraser is giving everything, not just because he won the award, but like there's a reason he was nominated. There's a reason he won. Like he's giving everything he's got. There's a true passion here. Tom Hanks is not the right person to throw in a fat suit and tell him, hey, do a weird version of a Dutch accent for the whole movie. Like,
which that movie, why not take liberties with just use Tom Hanks and go, look, we're gonna change how the Colonel was, because again, and I don't know enough about the history of Elvis, but from everything I've heard about the Colonel, yeah, he had a weird Dutch accent, but it's going to sound so bad, and it's also going to look so alarming. He looks like he's cosplaying as like the Penguin,
You just said it.
Yeah,
We were all thinking it.
and I love Tom Hanks. I absolutely love him, but it's like that's when you have the idea in your head and you go, you know what? This is our look. I'm Baz Luhrmann. I can do whatever the hell I want. Okay,
Right.
just make it Tom Hanks. Just be like, look, Tom Hanks,
yeah,
do a Southern accent,
Yeah,
whatever. We
just-
don't care. But
yeah,
the
and
movie
it's just so wrong, and
the
it's
movie
yeah.
is so over dramatized anyway.
Exactly.
Like,
Yeah,
what are
yeah,
you trying to like?
just lean into it. Why are we
Well,
doing this? Yeah,
well, look,
absolutely.
Ana de Armas was just in a movie about Marilyn Monroe. That's not really a biopic about her.
Nope.
And but again, if people don't know that, they're gonna look at that movie and go, "Why does Marilyn Monroe have an accent?"
The
Yeah.
Like
the
I was
mainstream,
I was I was
Yeah.
so glad that it was Michelle Yeoh that won for
Mhm.
Best
oh,
Actress,
she's
because
fantastic.
that whole category, there I can think of probably three out of five names I would just completely remove and replace with people who are infinitely more deserving to be on the list. Not even necessarily win, because an example would be I would pull out Ana de Armas, who I love as an actress. I absolutely adore her. She's got my whole heart as a crush. But that movie is abhorrent. Like I was legitimately offended by the time I finished that film. And I don't blame her, but at the same time, like she should not be getting nominated for that over somebody like Danielle Deadweiler, who is literally shouldering this, like easily one of my favorite performances of the year. Movie, maybe not so much, but I wasn't offended by Till. Like I didn't leave the theater like I want to gouge my eyes out now. Like you know what I mean? Like Blonde was easily one of the nastiest pieces of filmmaking I think I've seen in a very, very long time. But I was very glad that it went to somebody who truly, truly gave a performance that deserves to be on the list and wasn't just there because okay, well, we got to like you're talking about, or you got to pander and you got to throw in the Avatar Way of Water because it made more money than God, and so we got to give it a recognition somewhere.
And Michelle Yeoh too. Again, I think she gained steam because I think a lot of people early on thought Cate Blanchett was like the slam dunk for it. At least that's how I was getting it, because she was winning a lot of like the independent like awards and stuff, and it was like, again, I hadn't seen Tar at the time, and still, to be fair, I've only watched half of it. But again, the half I've watched, I'm like, no, she's amazing. But like, sometimes it's like, just what Michelle Yeoh has to do in this movie, if she's not believable at all in that role, it does not work, because everything that's really why that whole cast is so good, is you have to have the weirdness factor, but it has to work in their universe, and it does. And it's why I was so glad to just see that movie completely kick ass. And again, I think it's just a great example of why like A24 is now becoming, I think A24 is kind of taken over like what Fox Searchlight was when they were starting to win for like
Yeah, or
Juno and
Focus
stuff,
Features
or
when they were
Focus
first
Features.
starting
Yeah.
out. Yeah,
So like
yeah,
A24 is now like, we not only know how to do like independent horror and know how to make a movie on a smaller budget that will do well enough, but now you look at like Uncut Gems, this like movies that even if they're not for you, they're gaining awards, but they're also now doing really well at the box office for what would be considered a, you know, pretty small budget to like today's standards
yeah.
of movies.
I was pretty sure that it was going to come down to Blanchett and Yao,
Yeah.
and I love both of their performances. From the list, those are easily my two favorite performances of the year, hands down. But I was so glad that it went to Yao because, as much as I want to give the Academy credit for having a lot more diversity in their year, this is it for her. Like, Michelle Yao's been fire for 40 years. Like, she's never not given a great performance, and she either needed to win tonight or she's never winning again. And that's just the harsh reality of the world that we live in. And for Blanchett, like, she's got
she's
three
like
under
Meryl
her.
Streep now.
Yeah,
she's got
she's
8
gonna be fine.
nominations.
Like,
Like,
right.
yeah,
she's gonna be fine. Like, just let her do Tar 2 Electric Boogaloo and she'll be fine. Like, she'll absolutely get another one. And with Yao, it's like, no, this is it. Same thing with somebody like Brendan Fraser and Ki Kwan. Like, those guys and those people that won tonight, I feel like, and the Daniels, truthfully, like, they're gonna go on to do a bunch of other stuff, but I highly doubt they're going to make Everything Everywhere All at Once again and get all the way to the Oscars and sweep it. They just won't. And so,
you know what's
all of these
interesting about the
newcomers coming was
Oscars?
awesome.
It was really cool to see all these newcomers win these awards. But I think about this, especially now that I have been more involved with film festivals, is the road that filmmakers and artists and actors have to take to get from debuting their film to getting to the Oscars is so long and
It's mind blowing.
Right?
Yeah,
it's a meat grinder.
Yeah,
I get exhausted thinking about it. Like, y'all, I think it was literally almost a year ago that Everything Everywhere All at Once debuted at South by Southwest, which also blows my mind that a Best Picture winner just debuted at South by Southwest.
Yeah, wild, absolutely wild.
And
all the promo material for the next like 10 years, right?
Yeah.
And I'll say this too about like Jamie Lee Curtis winning, which I know there's plenty of people online who weren't happy about that, but I'll say this, look, and I like Angela Bassett's great, and I look, I think that category was absolutely freaking stacked. I thought any 5 of those women could have won, and you'd have been like, okay, I'm fine. Like, okay, cool. And
that was the hardest category for me to pick, to be honest.
It was.
I could have given it to any one of them, honestly. Any one of them, and I would have been fine with.
And not that I like legacy Oscars, but look, Jamie Lee Curtis has done a lot in this business. Yeah. I think it is kind of cool that it's like, hey, you were good enough. And again, you give it to Angela Bassett, I'm fine with that. If you would have given it to any of those other women, that's fine. I think sometimes it's like, just take a step back. It's also okay that if you don't win, because it wasn't like egregious where someone's nominated where you're like, oh, it's Jamie Lee Curtis's, maybe it's her last chance for an Oscar, but you're like, oh, that role she was actually really bad and she only won because of her name. That wasn't the case for this one. And I think it was cool. And when she said the shout out to like her parents, who I'd have been dead a long time, but it's like, look, man, that's again kind of what this is. It's like, you know how many people whose parents were famous actors and then they flame out because their name only gets them so far. I mean, she's been relevant for a long time. And I loved her shout out to the horror movie genre where it's like, she's not forgetting her roots. Yeah. That's what kept her to become famous was, oh, you were really good in horror movies, which is not the case for a lot of actors or actresses who start in that genre. Usually it's like, oh, they're famous in that genre, but they're really not that good of an actor, or so I'm, again, I know people will get mad about that, but it's like, look, again, it wasn't like her performance was bad. Whether you thought it wasn't better than that, that's fine. But again, it was also a stacked group. It could have went to any of them. All had a legitimate chance.
And I think about people like Hong Chow, Stephanie Su, Carrie Congdon. Like, all these women are young and they're relatively young in their careers. Like, they're going to be fine. Like, they're not at the tail end of their careers, right? Like, especially people like Hong Chao and Stephanie So, like they're just starting their true resurgence, or ascension and arrival here into the bigger name. So like they're going to catch a project that will probably get them back here. And I would be dumbfounded if neither one of them make it back to the Oscars in the next couple of
Carrie
years.
Cogden's amazing too.
Oh
Like,
yeah, she's phenomenal.
so she's in. I don't know if you guys watch Better Call Saul, the show. But
I've seen
she was a
episodes.
she was a small character in it, and she hides her accent so well
Yeah,
that like when I watch Banshees of Inisherin, the whole time watching, I'm like, why the hell does she remind? Because I'm a huge fan of that show, so I'm like, why does she remind me of someone? And then I was like, oh my, I looked her up and I'm like, Jesus Christ, she hides that thick ass Irish accent so well. And I'm always more impressed when someone who's not from the US could do, an English, quote unquote, an American accent, not,
yeah,
like, okay, they sound like they were born in America, and then you hear them talk and it's like this thick Irish or English where you're like,
yeah.
how the hell did you, because when an American actor tries to do sometimes those thick ass accents, it sounds fake, but then someone with a thick ass accent could like pull off a perfect American where
Yep.
it's like,
It's so
man,
fascinating. I do
it's
think
crazy.
many other places in the world, actors over there do so much better doing an American accent than Americans are at doing other
Yeah.
accents. And it's such a nuanced thing because you notice it like right off the bat.
Right.
It's very easy to notice. But
Yeah, I love being British. That's like one of my favorite things in the entire world. But I also know that like my British accent is not nearly as good as a British person doing an American accent. It's pretty solid. I've been doing it for years, but I know that like if I do it long enough, like British people are gonna know. Like they're gonna know it's not real, and I don't have it fully dialed in.
You go to say hello, and they're like, "You're American, aren't you?"
Yeah, right.
I thought it was good.
Yeah, and look, it's much better than Austin Butler just being Elvis for the rest of his life. Apparently,
That's true.
Every time I was watching the red carpet up top and they kept interviewing him, I was like, bro, for the love of God, stop it! Like the movie's over. Like you're done. Like you are not Elvis anymore. You are from Anaheim. Stop it.
It's the real life Tropic Thunder of like of like an actor so into his character that he's like, shit, man, I can't even drop it with the DVD commentary. Like
I think that and this is just my own conspiracy theory, so don't take it seriously, but there's a part of me that's like, I wonder if that accent was a part of Austin Butler's award campaign.
For sure.
I get the feeling that he's gonna drop it in the next 3 months.
For sure. Because it does. I picked him to win, to be honest. I actually thought he was gonna win. I thought the critical disdain for The Whale and I thought Colin Farrell and Brendan Fraser were actually going to cancel each other out because they started losing steam in all of the precursors, and they were really the only things that were driving those movies forward. And then they started losing, and Austin Butler started really kind of taking over. And I thought, look, I've said this for a very long time, but like the Academy has a biopic problem. And they very rarely fix it. And I thought we were going to get Bohemian Rhapsody 2.0. And that's what I thought was going to happen. And I felt pretty safe about that pick. I was very glad to be wrong. But I'm actually going to subscribe to your conspiracy theory because I think he was turning it on because it is charming and it does like, it is a mama. We're gonna
the story, right? He was so entrenched in the role.
We're gonna take the Oscars all the way and see you back in Graceland. Like, okay, stop it. Like,
which a cool little moment that they kind of showed when everything won at Best Picture was Harrison Ford hugging Ke Huy Quan, which was like awesome. I'm like, and then Spielberg like touch it, like being like, oh my God, like that's so great to see. Cause I'm like, man, you want to talk about coming full circle in your career. Those Spielberg and Ford are two heavyweights. And like, you could tell they were, cause even, Quan talked about it. He's like, I talked to Harrison at like a convention about the movie. He goes, I'm so happy for you that this is great. And I mean, he thanks Spielberg in every acceptance speech except for this one, which I was like, I don't think he has to because I think Spielberg's like, I know you love me, dude. Like, we're really good, but like that's got to be cool to see that like this kid who you're just like you discover him as a kid, and then he kind of goes away and looks, it's just part of the business, like especially for kid actors. But then for at the time, there was no good Asian roles unless you wanted to be like the stereotype in a comedy that you're like, well, you'll get laughs, but you're just gonna get pigeonholed as that.
Yeah.
And it's, to take, like I said, his story was just so goddamn good to watch, and it's like
Yeah.
good for him. And now I'm like, show up in whatever you can, dude. Like,
Yeah,
just
do
now
whatever you got,
enjoy,
man. Do whatever you want. Yeah.
enjoy this
Yeah.
Yeah.
back nine, so to speak, of like your acting career. Because if you're in
Yeah.
your 50s, it's like, okay, really, this is when actors usually who have had a really long career, when they
Mhm.
hit their 50s, is when they start doing like the easy stuff, because they're like, dude, I'm tired of, like De Niro. I love De Niro,
Right.
but like, I don't blame him the last 30 years of being like, you
Yeah.
know what? I'm tired of gaining a lot of weight for roles and
Yeah.
beating the shit out of myself. I'll do fun things because
Yeah.
I,
I
what
was
else
gonna
do
do
I have
Jack
to
and
do?
Jill. Why not?
Yeah. Like, what do I have to do? What do I have to do? I've won, 2 Oscars. I've been nominated a bunch of times. I have
Yeah.
nothing left to do but to just have fun now.
I'm gonna confess a loss, and I was very sad about this, but I had a prop bet with my girlfriend about the over under of how many times the slap would be mentioned tonight. And I thought I was banking. I did not trust anybody. So I was banking on a high number. So we set our standard at the over under of 10. And I said, yeah, for sure. Like,
What
we're
did
gonna
it end up being?
honestly, if we don't take so Jimmy Kimmel did a couple of them in quick succession. So
Yeah,
I count it all as one joke.
Yeah, that's
my
fair.
girlfriend nailed it. She said, you know what? I think she didn't watch the Oscars. I don't know how she did this, but she was like, oh, it's going to be 4. Sure enough, it was 4. They did 4. And she was at 3 the whole night until the very end, where he went out and he did the little tally check.
That was
on
funny.
Oscars
like
without
that.
incident. And I was like, that's it. She nailed it. And she picked the under at 4, and she won the prop bet for a show she doesn't care about.
Oh my goodness. Well, I get the sense that the Oscars are trying to control the show a little bit better.
Yeah.
Give some precursor instructions, like, your speeches, let's keep them short, guys. Like,
Yeah.
come on, let's be professional. I get the feeling that there's a lot of behind the scenes maintenance that probably happened. That
And I actually really like Jimmy. I actually like Jimmy Kimmel tonight. I actually thought it was a solid opening monologue, honestly.
You know what, Jimmy, he was fine. I think, like you said earlier, he played it safe.
Yeah.
There were a couple things that I wasn't a fan of. Maybe it's just me being sensitive, but that Babylon joke he did in the opening.
I'm so here for it. I was so here for it. I'm always down for Babylon slander.
Salt in the wound that Babylon won nothing tonight.
Yeah, and really,
was
the
here
movie.
for it.
I think that was the front runner going into last year of like, oh, this movie
Yeah.
Babylon's gonna be huge, and then
Yeah.
instead it's like, oh god, it's just known for how much money it spent on its budget and how much it did not
Yeah.
make.
Come on, Babylon.
I'm not a part of the Babylon hype.
has to
Sorry,
win
guys.
No,
original
I haven't seen
score.
it yet. I'm gonna watch it
Has
though
to-
because
oh,
I want to
Nick,
give it
it's
a
only,
fair.
It's only 3 hours and 9 minutes.
I
long.
know.
Come
You know
on.
what's so
no-
funny?
no big
I'm
deal.
like, oh, couldn't they have just made it a mini series that just sounds more
Yeah.
palatable?
You know what? For real though, I do think Babylon would have played better as a miniseries. I really
They
do.
probably
You could have
would've.
done. You
Yeah.
literally probably could have done 3 episodes on the 3 main characters and been like,
Yeah.
okay, we'll just make this. We'll make this a banger mini series that doesn't cost $80 million.
Yeah.
I do.
It's
think it would've played
it's
better.
pretty wild this year too, because so much of this year is a reflection of all of these filmmakers coming out of the pandemic and having a lot of time to reflect. And a lot of what we're seeing, you see it with Spielberg, you saw it with Sam Mendes, you saw it with Babylon, right? Like you saw all of them really try to kind of create their own story and write their own story. Bardo is another example of them trying to, they had too much time to think. And so they were like, well, I'm just going to do a movie about my life and, exaggerate it. And so that's been kind of the true, I think if you were trying to encompass film as a whole and not do, outside of the blockbusters, like the film industry has been in just engrossed in this, filmmakers making their own stories. And it was, I don't know how I feel about it, but it was very interesting to see all of those blank. Like every single one of them, from Babylon to Bardo to the Fablemans, which I didn't care for. I didn't like it. I didn't like it on my first watch.
I'll be the only one here to like it. It's okay.
No, it's good. I like it.
I know.
Related to the Oscars, but what I will say is I think that movie is actually going to have a renaissance 10 years from now.
Yes.
I think that movie is going to fare far better when people look back on it. So I don't think it came out in the right time because it did come out in a sea of people all doing it.
It had a name that was never going to make money.
Yes,
it's called The Fabelmans.
That's
there was
true.
no way in hell it was ever going to make money.
Yeah, right. No, yeah. I was seeing like big outlets spelling it wrong, and I was like, guys, that's not. What are you doing? But yeah, I think 10 years from now, people are going to look back on it very, very fondly, myself included.
But you know what? Get this. I think the exact same thing about Babylon. Babylon is one that people are going to look back on in 10 years and be like, oh, that was a pretty good movie. How did it not win any Oscars?
You know what? When they got halfway through the movie in 5 to 10 years from now, they're like, oh, that's a good first half. And we'll work on the rest.
I can't get on board with Damien Chazelle, man. Whiplash is easily one of my favorite movies in the last 15 years. And then everything after that, I
gotta say, Whiplash, I was so late to the party on that movie. The first time I watched it was back in this past September for whatever reason. Yeah. And everyone kept going, Nick, you're gonna love it, I'm like, yeah, okay. And I watched it, I was like, motherfucker, I wish I would have watched it when it first came out. I'm like, man, that was good.
I was too early to Whiplash. When I watched Whiplash, it was the first year that I had attended a film festival.
Wow.
And so I literally bought the ticket thinking, oh, Miles Teller, I know that name. I didn't even really know who Simmons was, J.K. Simmons. I didn't even really know him at that point. I bought the ticket based on Miles Teller, who was also at the Oscars this year. I guess there's an interesting.
Top of Maverick, baby.
His career is kind of taken off. But yeah, I bought that when it played at the Vancouver Film Festival, and obviously sold out crowd. And I don't know anything about this movie. I'm so
me either.
In the dark about it, right? So in the dark. But before it got to mainstream, before it got a theatrical release, I was at a film festival screening it to a sold out crowd, and that standing ovation at the end of that movie is like one of the best theatrical experiences I've ever had in my life.
Like the last 5 minutes when he's doing that drum solo at the end, I'm like, holy shit.
Oh my God.
I've never been so intense watching someone play an instrument. This is crazy.
It's absolutely brilliant. I grew up as a performer. I did choir and I performed. I was on stage. I did stand up for a long time. And
me too. Not to the extent with stand up.
That whole scene where they sit down and he breaks up with her and he has that whole. I was like, oh my God, this is literally anybody that's ever had a passion. Like, holy shit. Like, I've had this conversation with people when I was trying to do these things. I love everything about this movie. But all that to say, I can't stand anything else Damien Chazelle.
Which is funny because.
And I'm glad Babylon blinks.
I think Chazelle, I liked La La Land. First Man, I didn't really care for. I actually enjoyed Babylon, but I agree that none of those movies really have the intensity that Whiplash came with. I think that there's
a personal attachment to it. You can tell that that's him. That's his Fabelmans, really. Like, I know everyone thinks Babylon is, but really Whiplash is his Fabelmans. That's
you're coming out pretty strong right out the gate, and sometimes that is to a director's detriment, is that you come out with a movie like Whiplash is like your first big movie, or big because it gets Oscars and it gets all this great buzz about it.
Yeah.
Anything after, it's like, man, you really gotta then like it for like a sports analogy, it's like being a home run hitter, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh man, you know what? I'm not really a home run hitter, but this one season I was, and now I'm not, and now you got to try it. So I think he's trying to find that balance of. Because like I like La La Land, but I like musicals. Like I grew up liking those. My wife likes them. So, and what's funny is actually when we saw La La Land, the opening number I hated at first viewing, and then like since then it's my favorite part of it. Yeah, it's so show tunesy, but I also just always wanted to see if someone, when they're singing on their car, if the guy was just like, "Get the fuck off my car," and then it's like. I'm like, I would have loved a parody of that movie. Just about to start the musical number, someone screams at the girl, and she's like, "Oh, sorry, I shouldn't stand on your car."
I'm going to tie it all back to the Oscars. I think you bring up a good point. I'm going to tie it back to the award show, and I actually have that fear. I have that Chazelle fear for the Daniels, actually, because I think that this is. I think a lot about, and Chazelle is a great example, but also like the Russos. Like the Russos are a great example too. Like they were responsible for not putting Marvel on the map, but really demonstrating the differences that Marvel can do. Like,
Yeah.
I think the Winter Soldier adds a whole new layer of actual film quality that you can put into superhero films, and then they translated that into Infinity War and
Well, the fact that
Endgame, and
they made Endgame and Infinity War a coherent story with that many characters
right,
is such a
So
testament. But it's
tough.
like now everything after, and I love
Yeah.
those movies. And as an MCU fan who could admit when I don't like one of their movies, but like I
Yeah.
love that shit. Those
It's
two
great.
movies were so good,
It's
but now
great.
it's like everything they've done since, everyone's like, oh, let down, and I'm like,
Yeah.
well, you hit your grand slam with those two movies
Yeah.
as is a big budget now.
Yep.
So any big budget movie you do after that, it's just gonna fail. It like
Yeah.
you have to get back to your roots, I think, if you're someone like the Russos and the Danielsons. What's gonna be tough is, okay, your next movie now is, are you gonna do something that's gonna stick with people like this,
Yeah.
like this movie
And that's
did?
hard because
It's
this
so
is
hard.
so
Such a
Everything Everywhere All at
unicorn.
Once is so lightning in a bottle. Like,
It is.
you cannot make this film twice, like, at all. And so anything else they do, like, I'm very afraid for the rest of their career. Not anybody else in it. Like, anybody in the film, they're all going to be fine. And all of the visual effects artists and the cinematography, like everything that they did to kind of put this film together on such a small budget, like the fact that they had 3 visual effects artists on this entire film, I still cannot wrap my head around that fact. Like,
But
that does not make sense to me. But yeah,
it's what separates the greats from the I guess one hit wonders, you know,
Right.
if you want to call it that. But like, you know, it's the Spielberg thing of doing Jaws and then following that up with Close Encounters, having like a dud with 1949, but then you come out with Indiana Jones and it's like,
yeah,
dude,
right.
just to say you directed Jaws, Close Encounters, and Indiana Jones in a 5-year span, any
That's
director
so
would
wild.
give
That's
their
such a
whole
career. He could have
to
just
be like,
stopped. He could have just
could've,
stopped
right?
making movies,
You know,
and he would still be
you
one of
know-
the greatest living directors of all time.
Yeah.
Maybe this is why I don't get into film, because if I was to do something that good, I'd be done. Like, yo,
Yeah,
I would,
right.
check, I'm good.
Oh yeah.
I go,
If
how
I
the
was
hell-
the Daniels, I would take my Oscars, quit, and never make another movie again.
I end on a high, start and end on a high note.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Yeah.
You know
I
what
don't
the
need to
Daniels could do?
jeopardize
You just
that.
be like, we'll just become producers now because
Yeah.
nothing we direct will
Yeah.
ever be
Yeah.
that
Just
good.
There you
slap
go.
their name on a trailer and just be like, from the makers of Everything Everywhere All at Once, and then let somebody else run and take the fail.
And it's funny, the Russos, you know, they talked about how doing the Netflix movie they just did with Gosling and Chris Evans, how
the Gray
they
Man.
how they only took that job because they're like, oh, we could now help produce this Everything Everywhere All at Once movie, and like they're like, we'll take a basically they said we'll take a shitty script type movie if we can now help filmmakers who we think are good and help give towards a movie that we believe in.
Yeah.
So it's like, no, maybe the Daniels do that for someone who they're like, hey, look, this kid's really good, or this guy's got a great idea.
Yeah.
Now we'll take like a big budget movie that we know is okay, we're going to try to make it good, but maybe it's not. But if it helps out someone, so it is cool when you see like people who don't need to help someone out do that, because the Russo brothers don't have to do shit the rest of their careers. They've done, they could say we've done 2 of the biggest blockbusters that were actually critically well received as well of
Right.
all time. Like, they don't have to do anything. So I think it's gonna be fascinating the next like 5 years from the Danielsons of like, what do they do now? Because like you said, it is such a lightning in a bottle movie where everything came together, everything came together at
I
this
can't.
perfect.
I can't say the word everything without.
I know,
following
I
up with
can't either.
everywhere all at once. Like
It
literally,
it is one of those titles that most if you're talking to like a movie person, you could just do the EEAAO. It's so
Yep,
much easier
yep.
than trying to type that whole thing out. But
it really is.
Yep.
no, it's
Especially
gonna
on
be,
a phone.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
it's gonna be fascinating. I think the next
know-
couple years for them for sure.
So I'll go ahead and wrap this conversation up, y'all.
Yeah.
I could talk all night, but
Oh, yeah,
I know.
no,
I
I'll
just
be here-
realized
I'll be
it's
here all
almost
night, yeah.
midnight, and I'm like, yeah, I should probably
it has
go
been
to
longer
bed
than
soon.
10 or 15 minutes, Nick. But you know,
Yeah.
so I was going to ask a question, but I think in light of the what we were just talking about, I have a different question. I think this is a really interesting way to end. Who do you think will benefit most from their Oscar win tonight?
Between actors and director, or and
Actors,
just any-
directors, in any category. Technicals. Who do you think will benefit most from their win tonight?
You know, here I'll go first. I just think he's gonna be in a lot of stuff, and also I think for him being so humble is Ke Huy Quan. I think
Mhm.
he is now like set himself up to be like, you could he could be in a comedy, a drama, or like he's going to be in the Disney Plus series, I think it's American
Yeah,
Born
American Born
Asian
Chinese
or
or
Chinese. Sorry,
yeah,
sorry,
American Born
it's the
Chinese.
American
Yeah,
Chinese. Yeah, so
yeah,
he's going to be in that. He's going to be in
Uh,
Loki season 2.
By
He's
the
going to.
way, with that one, I think pretty much most of the
Oh,
Everything
most of
Everywhere
the cast.
cast.
Yeah, I was
Oh,
going to say.
I saw
But
the
Michelle-
trailer and I was like, wait a
Michelle
minute.
Yeoh's so
Everything
like
Everywhere all at once
established.
light? Is that what's happening right now?
Yeah, it's basically they're like, let's just get all the good actors in that movie.
Disney said, you know what,
Yeah.
those Daniels are onto something.
Yeah,
We're gonna
exactly.
steal that and do
I
our
think
own thing.
I think he's got the what would be considered like the easiest road ahead because like Jamie Lee Curtis again, she's a name. You know, Michelle Yeoh, even though it's her first Oscar win, she can do whatever the hell she wants. Like,
Mhm.
you know, this was her, like you said, probably her last chance to get that Oscar. But like, I think he's probably set up to now where you could he could be in whatever he wants to do now. And again, he's such a likable guy that you could throw him in a supporting role for just any type of movie and be like, cool. Well, look who we got, an Oscar winner who also happens to be like the nicest person who everyone loves. So
Yeah.
I think his career is probably set up maybe the easiest path to just to keep being successful of the winners who, you know, I would say the winners who needed an Oscar. Whereas, like I said, I
Yeah.
don't think Michelle Yeoh, she could really do whatever like she wants. And
Right.
same thing with Jamie Lee Curtis for the most part. So it's like, you know, I think
Yeah.
for them it doesn't matter as much as like, and I'd say the same thing for Brandon Fraser as well. It's like, okay, now you're an Oscar winner, and again, you're a nice guy who everyone loves. That will get you far now, especially with the Oscar attached to your name.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, Derek, what do you think?
It's such a good answer, and I think if we're talking kind of real above the line, like you know the top 5 categories that people really talk about, I think Quan is the right pick. I think most of the people where yeah, you're absolutely right. Well, it is Michelle Yeoh's first Oscar, it's the Daniels' first Oscar, like their careers are going to be either the same or relative. And I think the Daniels will actually probably hurt the most. But you're right. Curtis is going to have a career whether she got nominated or not. Like she is already a name. She's already very well established. Michelle Yeoh, yes, this is her last chance to win an Oscar, but it's not her last chance to work. Like she's gonna be fine, right? Like she's gonna continue to do the things she's always been doing. So I think if we're talking actor, we're talking kind of all of the big categories. I think that Quan is probably the one that has the most opportunity, where the doors have now opened for him to truly be, I think, the actor he's always wanted to be, where he no longer has to worry about getting typecasted. He can do roles that truly interest him and, you know, really do things where he doesn't have to be typecast. He can do whatever he wants now. The world is open to him. And I think his story, you know, like you're saying, like his story of just humility and how just joyful he was to kind of take this on. I think he benefits the most there. I'm going to say, because all of the below the line and all the technical stuff, it's so hard. But I actually think I'm going to go, you could probably do most of these technical ones, but I'm going to go score, and I'm going to go All Quiet on the Western Front. I think when you talk about kind of the below the line categories or categories only us are going to geek out about, I think the people that made that score, I think they're going to get a lot of offers. The scores that they beat out and the nominees that they beat, I mean,
you sure the young upstart John Williams isn't going to be the one to benefit?
He's got a long, illustrious
oh my
career
god!
ahead of him.
He's like, why did you?
Fun at, by the way.
I know. Yeah, he's like, why did you nominate me? He goes, yes, my score was awesome, but come on, like, I know I'm gonna lose. Just you don't have to.
Poor guy.
Okay.
I love him so much. I saw him live at the Hollywood Bowl, and he was absolutely amazing.
Oh, God.
That's funny.
But yeah, I think of all the scores. I remember just as soon as I watched that movie, I never forgot those 3 notes. Like I was it just rang in my head for months. So
that movie's so intense. Oh man,
so
it's good stuff.
You hear like you just see war, and then they walk into this room, and then as soon as you see those bodies, it's just wow, and I was like, oh my god, what is going on? So I think their win and what they were able to do and who they were able to beat. I think the score and the people that made that score for All Quiet, I think you can see their name. You'll see their names a lot in the future to score a lot of really interesting projects, and I think they're going to thrive.
Yeah, I think both of you make very valid points. I'm going to round it out being super optimistic, like maybe even more optimistic than I deserve to be about this. But I do want to go back to original song and point out that Not To beat out two really big names in American
Powerhouse
music.
names in American
Yeah.
music.
Oh my
Powerhouse
God,
names
right?
that are very recent, like that recently have things to have propped them up to possibly win. And so I don't know if the writers of that song necessarily will benefit as much as I'd like them to from this, but I would like to see this propel, Indian film more into American culture, because I really do think that RRR was a grand example of how there's a whole culture of cinema that just does not reach America. And RRR just managed to have the right combination of being thrilling and exciting and entertaining to make it over here and to really grab hold. And so I'm hoping that this win really helps boost the idea that we can enjoy Indian film over here, right? And let's do more of that. And I know this is kind of, in the grand scheme of things, kind of a small award or a small win for that campaign, but I really do hope that people look at this and say, hey, look, we liked it on Netflix, we enjoyed it, it's an Oscar winner, let's get more of this into American culture and let's see more.
Well, and RRR is just it's an absolute powerhouse stateside. Like, I don't think any and my girlfriend is Indian, so like I've been very versed in Bollywood and Tollywood and all of that kind of stuff. And RRR, I think you're absolutely right. I think not to just having that be the only entry they had into the Oscars, and then beating Gaga, who clearly has a passion for this song, and then beating Rihanna, who just came off of her Super Bowl performance. Like, dude, that is huge. Like, that speaks volumes about the ceiling of where, Bollywood and just Indian cinema can go in Hollywood. So yeah, that's a great pick.
Yeah. So all right, guys. Like I said, we could go on like this.
I know. You'll have to cut me off because I'll do this all night. I have insomnia too, and I haven't taken my gummies. I'm good. Like, we're good, guys.
I have to cut me off, right? All right, let's go ahead and wrap up. I want to make sure you guys plug what you do. So, Derek, just to kind of give us a plug. What do you have going on? What do you?
No, definitely. So you guys can follow me on nerdbot.com. I'm kind of their resident reviewer. So I primarily do film criticism. I try to see as many movies as I can. I hit 210 last year, so I'm trying to go for 300 this year. Nice. with only one festival under my belt, so I was pretty impressed about that. That was pretty good. So but no, you can catch me on there. You can follow me on Twitter at DROK Comedy. It's DROK Comedy, and then you can just look me up on any social media, same name on Instagram, and then Facebook at Derek Murray, my first and last name. But try to get to as many movies as I possibly can. And then Letterboxd, absolutely, of course, you can follow me on Letterboxd. It's like my new favorite media to log all my stuff, because otherwise I'll forget.
Yep. I'm behind on Letterboxd. I have to go back and backlog a bunch of things, but yeah, very nice. Definitely connect with Derek. And Nick, tell us about your outlet.
Yeah, so I just started a podcast, Nick Flicks Podcast.
I love that name, by the way. That's so good. I love it.
There was plenty of Nick Flicks YouTube channels, but no Nick Flicks podcast. So I just was like, you know what? I need to start this. Been talking about it for over a year, and so Thomas is a guest. It's going to be in a few more weeks. So I recorded about like 5-6 episodes before I started dropping it, so I could start, funneling through. And I do spotlight episodes that are solo ones. Just again, it's all about movies, and I'm working on different formats, so episodes will be a little bit different going forward. I had a general idea, but ultimately it's like, look, it's talking movies, and I want people who want to come on who want to talk about movies. So but yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at NickFlixPod, and same thing on Instagram. Just look for the sign that looks like Netflix but says Nick Flicks Podcast. You cannot miss it. But yeah, so I'll have a new episode technically will be available tomorrow night, but generally I usually like post it on Tuesday. So yeah,
Very cool.
but say, and then like I said, Thomas, our episode will be coming up soon, man, which was a lot of fun. That was,
Yeah,
we could have
I-
talked for like 3 hours on that
we
one.
could
So
have. I
yeah.
love talking film with with
Yeah,
friends.
I love
So,
it. I love
it.
It's a
So
lot
good.
of fun. I can't wait to share that that episode. So
Yeah, my 15 minutes went way past when I was like, yeah, I could come on really quick and
You
talk.
did
And
say
when
you
we got
said
going,
10
I'm like, oh God. And I'm not even tired. I'm coming off of like 2.5 hours of sleep. And I'm like, I don't think I'm gonna be able to. I went back and forth with my wife. I'm like, should I go on? Should I go on? Not. And Thomas said it's okay. I don't have to. And she's like, just go on with him. You seem like you want to go on. I'm like, yeah, I'll do 10, 15 minutes. No big deal.
the ultimate lie of a cinephile.
That's right.
Uh-huh.
That's right.
10 or 15
Yep.
minutes.
We always undersell our time. Yeah.
No,
once you get more than one cinephile in the room, it's over. It's
I'll
done.
tell you this: it's the
Done.
one dad thing I do, which is I don't have a good concept of time. Yeah, no, I am just like my father when it comes to that. So yeah, no, this
That's
was
so
fun,
funny.
man. You guys were awesome.
Yeah, this
no,
was
both
great.
of
Thank you.
So thank you so much for joining me in this conversation. I'm so glad that we got to watch the Oscars and talk about it. And I imagine we'll probably be talking more again here in the near future. So
Yep.
yeah, thanks for being on, and for everyone
All
out
right,
there
everyone.
watching. Yep. Until next time, guys, keep it for real.
All right, good night, guys.
Okay, I'm gonna hit stop.